Welcome to New Paradigms for Finding Insights. I'm Sue York, and today I'm joined in discussion by Geoff Lowe from Infotools and Ray Poynter from Potentiate. We'll be taking you through a series of questions and discussions, and at the end, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask your questions. So to begin, welcome, Geoff. Would you like to say hello to the audience?
Hello, everybody. This is Geoff right here.
And Ray, welcome.
Hi, Sue. Welcome, everybody.
And hi to you too, Ray.
And you.
So thanks for joining us. The very first question people will probably be thinking, Geoff, is why are we talking about new paradigms?
It's a great question. So much is changing so fast in our industry. In fact, the way I think about it, there's three main things that are changing. The first is that our clients want everything faster and cheaper and better, but the timelines are shortening all the time, and that means that agencies and clients have to move faster to find the insights. The second is that the amount of data that we have to wade through in order to get those insights faster is just growing at an amazing pace. So that we're having to find smaller and smaller needles and bigger haystacks. And then on top of that, the technology that is allowing us to do that is changing also at a rapid pace. And the great thing about that is that those new technologies are helping us find and deliver helping us deliver the new paradigms.
So, Geoff or Ray, could one of you give us an example of one of these new paradigms? Or maybe you've both got an example. Will we start with you, Ray?
Hi, Sue. Yes, I'll jump in with one. So I think that the whole area of computational text analytics is a great example of where there is not just a change, but a paradigm shift. We've got, as Geoff was just saying, a lot more text, an enormous amount. We need to analyze it quickly, but luckily we've got smarter AI-based approaches. So if we think about what the human paradigm is when we interpret text, it's usually a small amount of text, which means we often ignore most of it. If we had a book, we would take a few pages. If we have Twitter stream, we would take a few samples from that. But then the human tries to interpret that really, really strongly, looking at what's going on, trying to understand it, and then generalize from that detailed picture. Now let's switch that to the computational picture. In those techniques, we take all of the text, but then we start by throwing away not samples of it, but certain types of information. So we tend to make it lowercase. We remove the punctuation. We often take out what we call stop words, the, he, and so on. And quite often we reorder the words, not even in sentence order. So we've lost a lot of the meaning when we use those computational techniques, but they have the benefit of taking the whole data set. They then take averages across all the data set to produce an interpretation. It's a very different paradigm, but it's one that can work really quickly with really large materials, large amounts of data. And that's the sort of change that we're seeing.
Thanks, Ray. Geoff, have you got an example you'd like to share?
Yeah, I'd like to throw in Bayesian statistics. Traditionally, and certainly for most of the time I've been involved in market research, the way that you find things out is the main tool for finding things out is the humble crosstab. And if you really want to understand what's driving differences between groups, and the crosstab is your main tool, you have to do a lot of them. And when you're testing for differences, you want to apply typically traditional classical statistics to test for those differences. The problem is, though, with the volume of data that Ray referred to and that I mentioned up front, there's so many tests that you have to do. And classical tests, like the chi-square test, really start to fall down when you are doing a lot of them. Bayesian statistics do not suffer that same weakness. And when you're trying to automate the finding of differences between groups to find the drivers of things that are happening, then you really need a statistical test that is going to be really robust. And one of the things we're looking at Infotools is ways that we can apply more modern statistics that will give us the robustness that we want. And we found that Bayesian statistics is a solution that works.
Thanks, Geoff. I imagine if people are on the call, Bayes is one of those things that's really on their mind. What's a good way for people to learn more about Bayesian statistics, particularly if, like you, they are used to a different sort of classical statistic?
Yeah, Google is a really good place to start. We're actually at Infotools, we are planning to put out a white paper on how we're applying it and the reasons for it. Why Bayes? So look out for that. In fact, while I'm on it, if I may, I can just flesh out a little bit more why it is that we think that Bayesian is the way to go in some circumstances in research. The classical chi-squared type tests of significance test that the data is right given a particular hypothesis. What we want to move to is finding out what is the probability that the hypothesis is right given the data, and that's what Bayesian allows us to do. If you're doing a lot of tests, as we do in our Discover tool, which you'll be able to see separately, you want to have that robustness, and the Bayesian allows us to achieve that. So look for the white paper that we're putting out. Check on Google, and it's actually not, the principles are not that hard. I am no statistician, but I feel like I've got a pretty good handle on why it is a better way to go.
And I'm just going to chip in there because I think people will probably hear this phrase frequentist when they start looking into it. So frequentist is the sort of stats that you were taught at high school, you used at university, and the sort of the normal fare. And the alternative is the Bayesian approach. And we're seeing Bayes statistics and Bayesian approaches in not just our data, but in terms of analyzing financial data, epidemiology, all sorts of areas. The law courts are beginning to use it to assess the probability of events given something else. Because what it brings in, and Geoff mentioned it there, what's the probability the hypothesis is true given the data, is this phrase given that. So we bring prior information in, and it allows for a much richer, much better interpretation of information.
Thanks, Ray. You talk a lot about new research, new methods, new techniques, new paradigms. Where else can we see some of these new paradigms at work?
So Ray again, so I think one of the interesting areas is the way that artificial intelligence is being used. It's being used in masses of different areas. So I'm just going to pick out another one, which is predictive or even prescriptive models without going through traditional processes of using linear connections, multilinear regression between variables. So we're starting to use machine learning, and one of the things that's really interesting, linking back to what Geoff has just been saying, is that one of the technologies that underpins that is a thing called Bayesian networks. The strength of that is it deals with probabilistic events that contain uncertainty, because let's face it, everything's got uncertainty, and we need to really build that into the process. Creates a new challenge for researchers though, because when we use these machine learning approaches and AI tools to create prescriptive models, what we get actually is a black box, in that we don't get assigned values for individual pieces. So this changes the way that we have to test it. We have to use induction. Does it work? Build up from the observations, rather than deduction, which is sort of based on the formal logic at the background. So again, we're seeing new tools giving us new opportunities, but based on different underlying principles. And we need to be aware that we're going through this change. The everyday user isn't going to be confronting it, but somebody somewhere needs to know that we are actually pivoting quite strongly when we use these tools.
And Geoff, you've probably got another example that you'd like to throw into the mix at this point, have you?
Absolutely. So yeah, there's the term augmented analysis is something I think is really important in this context. You know, the role of technology is to, the role of developing technology is to get the machines to do as much of the hard work that they can. And as the machines get better and better, they can do more and more of it. And that frees the humans up to do what, for the time being anyway, the humans can still do better than the machines. And it's a ever decreasing space that we humans can play in, but it is a really important space. And some of the ways that we're using these principles in harmony are, we're building tools like Discover that takes a lot of the hard work out of running a whole bunch of crosstabs and finding where the big differences are. So it's almost like the principle of a cyborg. You know, we humans have got these machines making us so much smarter. Discover finds those things for us, and so as the human, all we have to do is build the story from it. We've got this really cool proof of concept that we're building in Harmony called InfoStory, which takes time series data and it runs a bunch of algorithms on it, and it turns the patterns that it detects into English language. It is just English at this stage. And what that does is it means that when the human comes in and sees the story that has been written by the machine, most of the hard drudgery has been done. The human just has to come in and add color to the story. And there's a number of examples in the platform where we're making the machine as smart as possible so that we can really leverage that kind of intelligence that, as I say, for the time being, we humans have over the machines.
Thanks. The impression I'm getting from both of you is that researchers are currently on a bit of a journey in this space. How can people get started on this journey? Ray, I'll get a tip from you first, and then Geoff, a tip from you.
Sure.
I think probably one of the first things people have to do is be prepared to let go of some of the old habits and to learn new ways of solving problems. Picking up on what Geoff has just been saying, people won't be replaced by machines if they learn how to use those machines better. There's an enormous shortage of people who can deliver the story and find the story. So we want people to be able to use these new approaches. We need to work faster, we have more data, and we're becoming aware of some of the limitations of the traditional approaches. So we need to adopt these new paradigms so that we are the masters of this process, and we've got the real skill advantage.
Could I add to that, Sue?
Yes, please do.
Yeah. Look, I would say try new tools. It doesn't need to just be Infotools tools. There are plenty of fantastic things out there, like web scrapers, automatic text analytics, and lots of these are applying the principles of machine learning. You don't have to understand exactly how these things work. You just need to understand how they can help you do what you do. So what I would say is just try things. Make some time to try some new ways of doing things, run it by other people, see what comes out, and if it's going to help, then go for it.
This might be a question for you, Ray, but Geoff, please feel free to chip in. It's a great idea, Geoff, to, I think, just get out there and, start using the tools and see how they work for you. But for people who are then wanting to say, it feels right, but how do I know that it's right? What are some approaches that people can use to sort of get a degree of comfort with what they're getting out of their new methods?
Well, I think you've got, first of all, the face validity. When you look at it, does it make sense? The second is, and this comes back to what Geoff's point, we don't expect everybody who's using the tools to be a statistician. We don't expect them to have a degree in artificial intelligence. But you do need to know the provenance so that you listen to other people, read the reviews, read the comments, keep in touch with the sort of things that you'll find on the websites, Research World, Research Live, all of these places will be talking around, of course, NewMR too, about the technique. So have a look at those, try them, compare the difference from your traditional way of doing them to this way of doing them. Really nice example I saw recently. One team used just humans to analyze text. The other team used humans and machines in augmented analysis, like Geoff was talking about. They then validated the results by asking the client which worked best for them. And guess what? The one that had the augmented analysis worked better for the client than the one that just had the human analysis. So those are the sorts of trials you need to do without needing to understand how did that automated analysis work.
So look, I can add to that if I may. Just listening to what Ray is saying there, it occurs to me that one of the things that we humans, I think for the longest time, are still going to have over machines is that we know what questions to ask. So I was encouraging people to just try new tools, and Ray has given some examples of that. The tools are only going to be as good at answering questions as you are at asking the right questions. And so I think it's really critical to understand that if you're going to make really good use of any of these technologies that Ray and I are talking about, you've got to still have the creativity, the knowledge, the understanding of what the ultimate goal is to ask the right questions.
I think that is really good advice, and I hope it's something that the audience keep in mind from this webinar. So thanks very much for joining us today, Ray and Geoff, and let's see what questions come from the audience.